Thank you guys for coming for this Monday afternoon workshop happening here. And then, when you guys sign up, you already know this is a workshop focusing more about strategies to manage back pain yourself. Because we offer a lot of treatments doing that here, but then we often notice a pattern a lot of people are having, and then there are a lot of very easy tips that everybody can be doing that every single day that helps to prevent the back pain from happening. Or whenever somebody's suffering from back pain, those are very easy tips for them to self-manage. And then those tips are actually very safe and very simple. And then that's why we really wanted to put this together just to give our community a better information on how to manage their own condition better. But then it's a very common condition, and then like the statistics mentioned here, 80% of the Americans will experience at least once of the back pain throughout their entire lives. So you guys are definitely not rare. Like most of the people you see on the streets, if you ask them, they'll probably have at least one time of back pain episode in their lives. And then um, another thing is back pain, at least 80% of people would get that, but then see the next point, 65% of them would have recurrent back pain, which means the back pain you have one time, it would resolve, but then there might be other episodes that would come in the future. And then this is related to a lot of stuff, a lot of things like the conditions we're born with, or a lot of time it's the lifestyle situation. We didn't know what's happening in our lifestyle, but then we keep going back into the old route, and then we keep feeding into that, and then that's causing the recurrence of the back pain. And something it's very shocking is that 10 to 15% of the people will actually be chronically disabled, like not able to do something. And then actually, a few weeks ago, like 2 weeks ago, somebody reached out to me that was on Facebook saying that her father-in-law was having a very severe back pain, very chronic situation for more than 10 years. And then that's like really limiting him, doing a lot of injections, nothing was helping. And then he was only able to lie in bed because he wasn't able to move out of his bed at all. So like it's a very common situation, but then if it's not managed properly, it can definitely be very, very severe. And then so this is why definitely this is a very important topic we need to talk about. And then if we are able to take care of that very early on, very simple strategies can actually go a very long way. And then so that's why we are here. And then so after talking about the statistics, I would like to talk about the mechanics of the back pain. Why would people nowadays are having that much of back pain? And then mostly it's like the lifestyle situation is different for us, our generation versus our parents or our grandparents. They used to move more, but then nowadays we drive pretty much everywhere. And I moved here from New York City, and in New York City we didn't really drive, but then we took the subway, which was also sitting for a very long time. And then for work, for school, we also tend to sit for way longer period of time than before. And then apparently we don't move as much. And then this type of situation, just sitting more, is creating even more of an imbalance happening in our body. There are even people saying the thing like sitting is the new smoking. It's like sitting, not moving for a long time. That's actually causing a lot of health issues to ourselves, but then specifically mechanically affecting our body. And then we would develop a lot of pain, different areas, and then back pain is the most prevalent. And then that's why it's very important to address that. And then the solution is very simple because the major problem is muscle imbalance. And then so the solution will be to address the muscle imbalance. That's the very direct solution. If you guys ever go to like your primary care or see a doctor, they do some imaging. They might tell you that you might have different conditions happen to your spine. Like scoliosis is one condition. Some people would say you have a narrowing of the joint of your spine, or you have a disc blown up, a lot of things like that. Like from the imaging perspective to see the spine, the imaging can usually pick up a lot of the issues, but then I can confidently say that most of the imaging findings are not necessarily the cause of back pain. If you really pick up every single person in this office complex, and then to ask every one of them to do an MRI, probably at least 60% of the people will have some sort of a problem in their back. But then if you ask them if they are having back pain happening right now, maybe not so much of the people would say like they are experiencing pain right now currently, even though their spine may be shown to have some issues, which is because the imagings are very, very specific, and a lot of the issues are kind of like a normal aging process that's going to happen. But then it's because of the activity level. Some people are a little bit more active. Lifestyle is a little bit different. They don't have that much of muscle imbalance versus somebody who tend to sit a little bit more. They will develop muscle imbalance much more easily and then having back pain, and then that's why. And so the solution to address the muscle imbalance is going to be very important to solve the root problem. And then let's talk about the muscle imbalance pattern. Muscle imbalance is usually composed of two aspects, which means we have muscles that are very tight, and then we have muscles that are very weak. And then the weakness and the tightness combining together is the muscle imbalance we are having. And then for nowadays, it's because we are sitting for a little bit longer period of time compared to before. The tendency of developing tightness will be, you can see, if we are standing, we are moving around, our hips are really all the way straight, but then if we are sitting, we are constantly moving the hips in a bent, shortened position. So automatically, the hip flexors would be a muscle group that usually is very tight. And specifically, the psoas muscle, which attaches from the center of our spine, passes through our hip joint attached to the hip. It's a hip flexor that lifts. I'll help us to lift our legs. Hip flexion is the motion, but then it attaches to the spine. The shortening of that muscle can cause back pain. That's the first one. And then when we are sitting there, bending our knees for a very long time, then the muscle behind our leg, behind our thigh, our knee, the hamstrings, is also another muscle group that tend to be tight very often. If you ask somebody to stand up and then try to touch your toes, bend over, not everybody is able to do that. That's a very typical muscle tightness there. And then for some people, if sitting for a very long time, they might have some numbness tingling happening in their glute pelvic area, sometimes shooting into the legs even. That's usually the piriformis muscle or some of the hip rotator muscles deep down in the glute pelvis region. That's usually another muscle groups that tend to be very tight. So there are multiple muscle groups that tend to be tight just from this prolonged sitting situation. And on the other hand, the muscle weakness is a different aspect that is coming along with the muscle imbalance. And then the first group that tend to be weak or not really functioning well is our core muscle group, which composes of the deepest layer of the ab muscles or diaphragm, pelvic floor, and also the muscles directly supporting our spine, attached to the spine, the multifidus muscle. Like those muscles essentially forms a natural corset of our body. You know, when somebody are doing some heavy labor work, they tend to wear a corset to support themselves. Now, our body actually has a natural corset buildup, which is the core muscle groups. But then if we are sitting for a very long time, we tend to just let it hang. We didn't really put energy in there when the muscles are not working properly, and then that's causing the problem. The muscles are becoming lazy. That's the first one. And then also, by sitting there here for a very long time, like I said, the hips are put in a shortened, flexed position. And then so shortening here, the muscles behind that, the glute muscles, which are essentially helping us to extend our legs, they tend to be weak. And that's another muscle imbalance happening there. Tightness happening here, and then on the other hand, weakness right behind the glute muscles. Usually it's weak. And so that's the pattern of the lower back that usually happens. And then you can see the pattern is really related to the posture we are having because of our body position. We have tightness on one side, and then the opposite side, we have the weakness. It's usually going hand in hand. And a lot of people are doing many different solutions or trying to do certain things to work on the muscle imbalance themselves, but then they don't seem to be very effective. It's like for some people, they like to do stretch. They feel like a lot of tightness. They are doing a lot of stretches. So they might be able to stretch the tight muscles out a little bit for a short period of time. But guess what? They are lacking. They don't really do a lot of strengthening. So they didn't really completely break the muscle imbalance pattern. They only address part of it, and then eventually it's gonna come back, and then they are having the pain they were dealing with before. Versus some of the other people on the other side of the spectrum, they go to the gym very often, they lift weights, they get a lot of muscles very stronger, but then they didn't really focus a lot on stretching the muscles on the other hand, and then so muscle imbalance is still happening. It's like you really need to find a very fine balanced approach that will address tightness and weakness at the same time. And then, which makes it a little bit complicated is that a lot of time the weakness and the tightness are also intertwined. The reason why a muscle is tight sometimes is because it's weak, because the muscles are not used to working at a very lengthened position. So they don't want to get hurt, get pulled, so they prefer to stay in the shortened position. The muscles are very strong in the shortened position, but then if you stretch them long, they are going to be weak. So your body would have a tendency of putting them short. Whereas a weak muscle usually also has some underlying tightness that goes along with it, because a muscle is like a spring. Well, actually, I have a spring here that's very heavy. A muscle is like a spring, and then when they are working, it's like a contraction is like this, it's a shortening. But then you see, if the muscle needs to shorten, it also has to be able to be lengthened first, and then it can generate the tension to be shortened. A lot of time, because there are some tightness, so the muscles it's not able to be lengthened as much. So if you really want to put into the work for the muscle to shorten, it doesn't have a lot of room to make the muscles short. So flexibility is also very important. You need to make sure the muscle is able to be lengthened so it can effectively be shortened. So not only does tight muscles and weak muscles always pair up and exist together, tightness and weakness are usually intertwined together. So it's a lot of people are viewing that as two separate concepts, but then most of the time it's really intertwined together. And then that's why it's very important to find an approach that really addresses these two aspects together at the same time. And then so today, I'm gonna show you guys a very simple way just to address the muscle imbalance to start with, and then we can go ahead and get started, but then we will be lying down on the mat to get started. It's easier to feel it and experience it. So we talked about that it's the sitting for a long time that can move our body kind of off the center of the normal ideal body position, and then that's why muscle imbalance would start. And then so let's find the ideal position where our spine, our back, our body should be. So by doing that, we can simply just lie down on our back. Really, and so if you lie down on the mat, you can feel like probably your shoulder blades, the chest area is in firm contact to the mat. Your feet are in firm contact. Your pelvis is in firm contact. So these are where the weight of your body is in contact to the mat. But then now, if you shift your weight from one side to the other, you will feel like the weight is moved towards one sits bone versus the other, to the left and to the right. And then the ideal position from this plane, you know very obviously, is that you want to stay right in the center. You want the weight to be distributed right in the center. So the left and the right feels very equal. That's the first thing to find. I am telling you with this place because this is the easiest. And then the second one is a little bit more confusing because you might not feel this is the ideal or this is the center. It's you tilt your back, you think about you are arching, you are tilting your pelvis forward, or you have a marble on your belly button. You are trying to arch your back so the marble will be rolled down into your pubic bone. That's an arch, exaggerated arch. And then if you reverse that, you flatten your back, really pressing down into the mat. You will feel like the marble is rolled over from the pubic bone into your belly button. So we can do that a couple more times. You arch and then you roll the marble into the pubic bone, and then you reverse, you roll the marble into your belly button. You keep doing that a couple more times. You really exaggerate the motion in both directions. All the way arch versus all the way tucked. And then I want you to find the middle center point, or like right in between, all the way arched, all the way flattened. That's your center. How are you guys feeling? Good. Yeah. So if you are able to find that position, that's great. But then for a lot of people in this position, they feel like that's kind of out of place, almost like a feeling. It's not the center. They feel like it's normal. Like if they just relax, their body would not be in that position. But then ideally, you want your body to stay in this position when you are relaxed. But then you might be feeling that you need to put in some effort or really concentrate on that to be able to maintain that position. So that's like the neutral pelvis and neutral spine, something you need to know. We are practicing this in lying down flat, but then we want this concept of neutral spine, neutral pelvis to be carried over in sitting, in standing, in any body positions we may have. So let's go ahead, have a seat.
When we are laying down, is our pelvis tilted any direction or is it perpendicular to the ground?
When you are
Like in that
lying
position?
down on the side, that's a good question. The tilting will be kind of like rolling onto the mat. Let me grab a ball real quick. So the motion is like this. When you are rotating the pelvis, when you're arching, it's like rotating forward.
Yeah.
And then when you are flattening, it's rotating back. It's this motion happening in this point.
And then at neutral, where is the pelvis pointing? Is it tilt? Or is it just straight up? Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, I think I see what you are saying. It is that usually the pelvis has 4 landmarks. Like at the front, you have the hip bone, and then at the back, which is part of the ischium, it also, part of the ilium, which also has 2 dimples, 2 bones right there. So if you are in a neutral pelvis position, the front and back usually will be about the same level, same line, or the front might be going down a teeny tiny bit lower. So if you are lying down right there, this line should be perpendicular to the floor, or like a tad forward, like maybe 5 degrees different. Yeah, but then it's still staying there. You pretty much need to have that perpendicular line at the top of your pelvis.
Thanks.
That makes sense? Yeah, sure. So that's the neutral pelvis. We were trying to find that in a lying down position, but then we can also find that position when we are in sitting. You might need to scoot forward a little bit. Carol already did. So yeah. So if you have a seat on the chair, you can also shift your weight to the left and to your right. You can find the way to the left and to your right yourself very easily. The weight will be directly on the sit bone. You find the center that way first, and then in this position, you can also do arch and curl like we did. Or you can simply make an bamboo spine, just laying yourself forward and backwards. You will feel like the weight is being moved forward and then moved backwards. When you lean forward, the weight is more to your pelvic bones. When you are leaning backwards, the weight is more to your sacrum. So you can find that the weight is being moved forward and backward. And then, same idea, you want to stay centered. You find the center and then stay there. So if you want some analogy for this one, you can find that your left and right sits bone is at your left and right, and then the front is your pubic bone, and then the back is your sacrum. So the 4 points kind of forms a diamond, and then you want your weight to be right at the center of the diamond. Here, center of the diamond. And then so you can always shift your weight to really find the center whenever you're sitting, doing anything, studying, working. You want to make sure you can find that center. But then on different chairs, you might find it easier or harder to maintain that because the height of the chair, your pelvic position actually can also play a role. So this is the next thing I would like to demonstrate. If you're sitting somewhere that your hips are higher than your knees, it's very easy for you to be prompted to push yourself forward, and then it's very easy to arch our back too much, which is not neutral pelvis, neutral spine position. On the other hand, if you sit on somewhere that's too low, your pelvis are lower than your knees. This way, it's very easy to put your weight a little bit more back to the sacrum. It's very easy to be in the slouched position. And then this is actually a very common thing a lot of people are having lifestyle-wise. It's sitting on the couch, sitting on the bleachers, like watching sports, things like that. This is actually very common, and then we would have this situation weight going too far back. And then you can see a commonality here. If your back is slouched, sitting back too much, that's exaggerated hip flexion here. So like if my hips are higher versus my hip is lower, you can see that if my hip is lower, that's further exaggerating the hip flexion, which also feeds into the muscle imbalance we talked about earlier. Whereas if you sit somewhere that's too high, the pelvis is higher than the knees, like if you're able to maintain your body straight, it's not too much of a big deal. But then the problem is when you are having a tendency of arching your back, you are also having that too much of a hip flexion happening right there just by the tendency of arching your back. So sitting either too high or too low does not help with the neutral alignment, and then both can feed into the muscle imbalance pattern we talked about earlier. And then if you're able to find a chair that is putting your pelvis and your knees about equally high, which is why I intentionally set up this chair. I didn't want you guys to sit on the reformers. For the same reason, it's because this actually makes your knees and your pelvis about the same height. Then, if you really want to slouch, you have to be very intentional, like to slouch and then you slouch or you arch. Like you have to really think and put effort into it so you won't be in that muscle imbalance pattern. But then if the right height is there, you're kind of already in a neutral spine, neutral pelvic alignment. So this is definitely something to check. Is like the chair you are sitting most of the time throughout the day for work, at home, for school, are they at the same height? You have to make sure the knees and the pelvis are about the same height. Sometimes if the chair is too high, something you can do is you can put up a box or something to prop your feet up if lowering down the chair is not possible. And then if the chair is too low, you can easily put like cushion or pillows to prop the chair up, which would help you to find that position. If it's too low, you want to prop it higher. If it's too high, you prop your feet up or you lower the chair down. And then there are sometimes like bleachers or couches, you're not really able to adjust the height of that. Or like if you're watching a game, like sports game, like right now COVID, no, but one day, it's not gonna be like you're not bringing a cushion with you to the stadium. No. What should you do? Usually, the chair or the bleachers, they usually have the space under the chair. So even though if you are sitting too low, you are able to somehow tuck your legs down. You are able to lower your knees down, and then you are able to have the better alignment. Which I'm going to demonstrate that in the lower seat. Slouching, right? So if you're able to scoot yourself forward or somehow find more space between your leg and the back of the chair, if you just move your legs down, you have more space to sit a little bit forward. Bend your knees in a little bit more so the knees and the pelvis are about leveled. And then you are able to have that neutral pelvis. So you have many strategies to work on to maintain this position. You just need to be a little bit more creative. Sometimes you can sit a little bit more sideways or in a diagonal. That's easier for you to create more space too. So but then you got the idea. You want to be able to find ways to keep our pelvis and our knees about level to maintain that better position. So we've never thought of that. Yeah, that's like especially nowadays we are gonna be sitting for several hours a day. That's just very common for everyone of us. If you're able to pay attention to that and then to really make sure you fix that alignment, that's gonna be very beneficial. That's gonna be way more beneficial than anything else you do to take care of yourself because you just spend so many hours on that every single day. So definitely very important. And then once we have that, neutral pelvic alignment, we can talk about some exercises to work on elongating, stretching the tight muscles. We should talk about the first muscles that tend to be tight is the hip flexor, the psoas muscle. A very easy way to elongate and stretch that is you just turn yourself sideways. If you guys want to follow with the handout, we are at about release the tight muscle part. And then the sitting neutral spine is like what should we do under there? And then now releasing the tight muscles. So the psoas muscle, if you're having a seat, there you sit sideways. You drop one leg down. That's elongating the psoas muscle, the hip flexor of the down leg. You can probably feel some stretch, some elongation happening there already. And then you really focus on, if you focus on what your spine is doing, you will see if you drop this leg down, we might have a tendency of arching our back. It's very normal because of the muscle pull. So you want to intentionally really tuck and then keep that neutral spine right there. And then when you move the leg back, you still want to keep it right there. And then you can really feel the stretch. If you arch, you're not going to feel the stretch because you don't have a stable foundation. If you engage the core and then you have a stable foundation, you will be able to feel the muscle elongation. And then you guys are already switching. Yes. Stable foundation. Move the leg into position. You just stay there. It doesn't have to be cramped very far. No. You just stay in the right position. You will feel the stretch. While you guys are maintaining your stretch right there. The reason why I mentioned about the stable foundation proximally is because that's what happens with a stretch. A stretch happens when one point is stable, the other point is pulling. That's a stretch. That's elongation. So if you're stabilizing your spine position, you drop your leg. That's the same thing. You are elongating the muscle. You are stretching the muscle. That's a stretch. If you drop the leg and then you arch your back, nothing is stable. It's like you're holding it and this side is moving, so it's that's not a stretch. If you fix one side, move the other side, that's a stretch. Use this concept for whatever types of stretching exercises, even other body parts. You always use this same concept. One side is stabilized and then you pull from the other side. That's the first stretch we talked about today. The second stretch, which is the hamstrings, you can do that in sitting, but then easy to do that in sitting too. You just straighten your leg forward. You can already feel that there are some stretch behind your hamstring. Hamstring is behind the leg. It helps with like moving the hip back or bending the knee. So if you just straighten your leg out, you automatically already feel the stretch. And then, like I said, if you straighten your leg, you didn't think about the stabilizing the proximal end, you would be pulled and then slouch very easily. You don't do that. So you want your neutral spine right there and then straighten your leg. You can feel some stretch happening behind your leg.
And my quad, I mean my calf.
Yeah, definitely. The calf and the hamstrings are all connected through the back line, so you will definitely feel some. Then apparently we will switch side. And for some of you, if you guys want to progress the stretch a little bit more, something you can do is you totally can bend over, but then remember, you still need to have that neutral spine alignment. If you keep the spine straight, you bend over, you can feel the stretch is being deepened versus you just round your back. That's nothing. Like if you keep your back straight, you bend over, there we go, you have more stretch. If you round your back, not happening. That's the same thing, same analogy using the screen. We need to stabilize one hand while elongating the opposite. So that's a stretch for the hamstring. Another thing that usually is tight and then need to be stretched is the piriformis, something very easy to do in sitting. It's a finger four stretch. You probably all know that at some point. It's just moving one leg up and then keep the leg equally high. But then in this position, if you really want to deepen the stretch, neutral spine is going to be very important. You can see that if you arch or if you curl, you're not going to feel as much of a stretch. If you maintain that neutral alignment, you will feel some stretch happening at the bottom, at your hip region. If you want to deepen the stretch, you can totally hinge over, but then remember, it's that straight neutral spine. Yeah, running not so much. Hinging over, you will feel the stretch. And don't forget to do the opposite side. And I intentionally showed you guys these exercises to be done in sitting because this will be very, very easily to carry over. And then also we talk about sitting nowadays is becoming problematic, but then doesn't mean like we shouldn't be sitting at all. You just need to know ways to manage that, then sitting can still be alright. So these are the things you can do in sitting. So throughout the day, you are able to do something to self-manage everything you might be having for our back. So that's addressing the tight muscles when we're talking about tight muscles of the muscle imbalance.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
If you're tighter on one side than the other, like during that stretch, should you do more on the side that you're tight on, or should you try to be equal?
That's a very good question. We still want to do both sides. Yeah, I know, I get the concern is that one side is tighter than the other. You might just want to do one side versus the other. But then the thing is, if you're doing these exercises, you always focus on centering. Like if, let's say this side is looser, it's not as tight, so you push very, very hard. This side is tighter, it's more painful, so you just be very easy with that. Like this gonna further feed into the asymmetry, the muscle imbalance. But then if you're very intentionally about focusing on the symmetry, bending over, maintain the symmetry, no twisting, tilting, anything, making sure the spine and body alignment is still centered, make sure it's equal from side to side, that's all. Yeah, we want to facilitate symmetry. Yeah, we don't use asymmetry to cure asymmetry. Yeah, that's a very good question because a lot of people are wondering that. Yeah, so that's that. And then now, the next point, strengthen the weak muscle. We talked about engaging the, like we have to engage the core for some stretching already, but then we would like to dive into this a little bit further. And then if you really want to find how to engage the core muscle, you definitely need to have that centering, that neutral spine pelvis concept, which is why we spend a very long time finding that. And then talking about the sitting position. So then, let's say we already found our centering position of our spine. We are already centered right there. You will feel like there are 4 points in contact with the chair. The sits bone, the pelvis, and the sacrum, the diamond we talked about earlier. You really feel like you are trying to narrow this diamond, really squeezing everything to the center. Feels like you're kind of wanting to go to the bathroom, but then the nearest bathroom you can get is 30 minutes away. What would you do? You need to hold it tight so you're not letting it go. So you are narrowing that, don't letting anything go. Or if you need to put on a very, very tight pair of jeans, what would you do? You try to shrink and then narrow everything. Just by thinking about the narrowing, making the diamond smaller under your pelvis, you are engaging your pelvic floor muscle, which is the first component of the core muscle group. So that's the first thing. And then second thing is, let's talk about the top, which is the diaphragm. To find the diaphragm, it controls the breathing, and then you really need to intentionally focusing on breathing deep. When you are breathing deep, you will feel like it's almost like your stomach will be breathing to and then being inflated. So it's not the chest, it's the diaphragm. You feel like you are breathing into your stomach. If you want to really self-check with that, very easy to do. You put one hand at the rib cage right below the rib cage, one hand at the chest. You will feel like maybe you will have some chest motion, like the chest is pressed into your arm. You might have some motion pressed into your belly, into your diaphragm. You can probably see like there are pressure going on for both hands. But then I want you to adjust that percentage. I want you to decrease 50% of the chest and then move that 50% into your diaphragm. So when you breathe in, the top hand is not being pushed, only the bottom hand is being pushed out. That's using your diaphragm. Not the chest, but then breathing down. So you are able to find about breathing down into your diaphragm. Another thing to fine tune about using the diaphragm is that it attaches to the entire bottom of the rib cage and then the entire roof of the core, which means it's a very big plane. It's not just the front edge moving the belly out. When you are really breathing into the diaphragm, it's kind of like still like that diamond situation, going bigger and then going smaller. When you are breathing down, of course belly goes out, but then you will feel like the side of your body are also going out. And then even part of your back is going out. It's the muscle going out, in, all direction. So to really check this one, something I like to do is I form a C shape around my rib cage, like right at the bottom of my rib cage. And then so when you really breathe deep down, you have to feel like not just your middle finger, index finger feeling the motion. I want your thumb behind your rib cage also being pressed out. You feel the difference, right? Not just the front is happening of the entire circle. That's when you are truly able to use the diaphragm to breathe. It's happening like that. Not the chest, not just the front, it's the entire circle along that line is being breathed into. It's like normal breathing when you are sitting. You always have that feeling about using that muscle. So we address the bottom, the pelvic floor. We address the top, the diaphragm. And then now, the third component, which is the deepest layer of the ab muscle, the transverse abdominis, going from the front, wrapping around, all the way to the back, connecting to the multifidus muscle right along the spine. They form an entire circle core set around our lower back core region. And then to really find that muscle activation, you can think about like you're actually wearing a corset and then it has a zipper, and then you are trying to zip it up, really shrink it down. So you are having a feeling of the belly button is being drawn in. But then remember, when the corset is closing, it's not only just narrow, the zipper is actually going up, right? So you will have a lifting motion. The belly button is not only going in, it also goes up. A little bit of a scooping situation happening. You almost feel like you are kind of growing taller, like a line or a string is pulling you up taller into the ceiling. And then you can relax a little bit. You think about the line is pulling you up, narrow zipper down, pulling you up. If you really find that connection right there, focusing on the length elongation, you are finding the transverse abdominis and then the multifidus muscles working together. It's kind of abstract. Then it's like you really need to imagine while you are doing that, but then you can really feel a difference when you get those muscles working together. Let's go ahead, put all of these together, pelvic floor, diaphragm, and then the core, the transverse abdominis, and then the multifidus. So we are sitting here, very relaxed, very slack off. We are not using any core muscles at all. And then now, think about breathing in, air in into the diaphragm, opening the rib cage at the same time. It's opening down there. You still want to hold it narrow. You are not splaying out anything. And then when you are breathing in, you are maintaining that elongation feeling. So when you're breathing more air, you are growing taller. So all the components are happening together. Narrow, lift, expand at the diaphragm. And then when you breathe out, just let it go. Completely let go, slack off. And then when you breathe in again, diaphragm expand, lift at the spine, narrow at the pelvic floor. Really intentionally squeezing, engaging everything, and then breathe out. Just let go, slack off. Let's do one more time. Breathing, expand the diaphragm, elongate the spine, narrowing the pelvic floor. You keep everything engaged. Now this time when breathing out, instead of letting go 100%, you still stay about 15-20% of the effort right there. So when you breathe out, you still have some of the work going. So it's not going from all the way up to all the way down. You are coming down to still having about 20% right there. That's your core engagement. That's something you need to do with core control for everything, not just sitting. Standing, walking, doing anything, you want to have that core engagement. That core connection has to be always there. So you are always bringing that core step with you. If you go back to the old habit, like swaying, slacking off everything, you threw the core step away when you are doing it. If you have that connection intentionally to hold for the 20% muscle connection, you are having the core connection, having the core step with you. That's a very important concept. And then this might be very foreign to you guys because you just heard that today or not, but then when you practice more, think more, eventually this would become a habit and then you don't need to concentrate on that as much because it's automatically your habit, you are doing that yourself. But then just remember the ways to really find your connection with your core, find your center, pelvic floor narrowing, lifting, diaphragm expanding. These are the things to focus on that helps you to engage your core, which is very important. Any questions with that?
No, that's very good.
Okay, there's a very huge chunk of stuff, but then you can also see those pieces are actually putting together, and then you need to do every single one of them together to make it happen, right? So that's the core connection thing. And then the next thing is the muscles that usually would get weak. We talk about is the glute muscles, hamstring and the glute sometimes. A lot of times they work together because they extend our hips, and then so that's why I put it together. And then this exercise will work on that, which is also very needed in order to break that prolonged sitting muscle imbalance pattern. We will need to lie down on our back. So this is a bridge, and then for the bridge, it's not just lift your bottom pelvis up that easy. Remember that feeling about the neutral spine will still stay right there, and then when we are lifting, we initiate the motion with the pelvis to tilt, and then followed by lifting the spine up segment by segment. If you really do that slow, you will find that you actually need the core connection we talked about earlier to put this together. So you tilt, and you lift, and then you come down. So you really find that connection, the core engagement right there. You will be able to separate the spine motion segment by segment. And then when you come down, segment by segment, you come down as well. It's very different than you just move everything up in one piece and then lowering down in one piece. If you do it slow, in control, very intentionally, maintain that core connection right there while you are moving, you are able to put everything together with better control and then with the core engagement, which is very beneficial. This is the way to activate the glutes and the hamstring muscles back there without putting any further stress to our back. Okay, that's that. Any questions with that? No? Okay. A very easy exercise to find the core connection. Now, that's the muscle balance part we talked about. The next thing, we talked about the neutral spine, we talked about the core connection. Another thing is that we need to carry this concept over to everyday life. For example, we're not gonna be just in a static position for the entire day. We would need to be moving around doing certain tasks. For example, if we need to lift something up, I'm going to demonstrate a way of not using any connection. It's like I'm bending over. You see, I'm already breaking that neutral spine pattern. Like I'm bending over, that's not neutral spine at all. When you do that, usually that hurts the back of many people very easily. Is that not really paying attention to the connection, the neutral spine thing. If you try to maintain your neutral spine, you would want to make sure your spine is straight, everything is narrowed, controlled, engaged. What would you do? You can do it by bending at the knee. You see, if I'm bending at my hip and my knee, my spine is still straight. You still have that narrowing core connection feeling. So if you squat and then look up, you see my motion. My spine is still straight, right? There's no bending over happening. You can keep this spine connection there, keep your spine stable while you are moving your leg, moving different body part with that connection when you are doing several things. And then if you, other than lifting, you need to lift something elsewhere, you can always turn at your legs, at your hips, versus twisting. So if you twist your back, it's another thing like moving away from the neutral spine position, which is stressful. So twist at your hip and your knee. Spine is still stabilized, core still connected. So you learn ways to manage the bending and then the twisting. Another thing is sometimes we just want to, we feel like we have very long arms or legs or something, we just like to reach very far. You can see like if we're trying to reach something, it's very easy for me to move away from my neutral spine, that connected position. So you always want to keep everything as close to yourself as possible for better stability. So like I put the object very close to my body, so when I lift things that way, very close to my body, I can still find that connection very easily. And if you really shorten the distance from the object to your back, you shorten the leverage, which would further decrease the stress you would ever put on your body. So body mechanics with the consideration of engaging the core we talked about earlier. So that's the point of body mechanics. And then there are other aspects of lifestyle that's very important in terms of managing back pain and other conditions. So first, let's talk about sleeping. Sleeping quality definitely is very important because our body can take tremendous amount of effort to heal ourselves if we are sleeping properly. So to improve your sleeping quality, you definitely want to keep it regular. You guys may be doing some long distance traveling before. Maybe you know that when jet lag happens, it's very hard to fall asleep at night. It's because you were used to falling asleep at a certain hours, but then you change that. Your body's not used to that. That can compromise your sleeping quality. Keep the room cool. Ideally, 10 degrees Celsius or 20 degrees Fahrenheit lower to your body temperature. So usually if you keep your room at around like 74, 73 degrees in the room, that usually is a very comfortable room temperature for our body. Usually we would sleep better in that position, in that environment. And
I'm sorry, Jennifer's here.
oh, okay, we are almost ready. And then, so keep it regular and then keep it cool. And then third thing is supported and then neutral position, which is that neutral position we talked about earlier. So just demonstrate that real quick. Sometimes, especially for somebody if they have very, very tight hip flexor we talked about working on earlier before, or tight hamstrings, they can easily pull our pelvis forward. It's not a neutral alignment right there. You still want the neutral alignment when you're sleeping. I find it helpful to have a bolster under the knees. That usually helps to have a better alignment right there. And I also like to put pillows under my arms. You can either do this if the pillow is big enough, or you do one pillow at a side so it supports the shoulder better. doing that, it offset the tension of your shoulder better. And then because some shoulder muscle also attaches to the back of the spine, so if the shoulder position is not in a very relaxed position, that can also create tension and then move our spine out of the centered neutral position. You want your shoulder to be 30 degrees out, 30 degrees forward. So that's the sleeping position we talk about. So that's the sleeping we talked about. And then we all know that diet is very important. And then there are many different types of diet, but then you will find that the pattern is a healthful diet usually, like they are very similar. The ideas are very similar. They want us to drink enough water, hydration, very important, and then eat more fruits, eat more vegetables, whole grains, so we have enough or adequate intake of vitamins and minerals and nutrients. Yeah. And then they often encourage us to use more healthy fats like fish oil or certain types of vegetable oils because of the unsaturated fatty acid that's better for our health. But then you also want to pay attention to the type of fat you are having. For example, omega-3 versus omega-6. Omega-3 is usually found in deep ocean fish, which is good because omega-3 helps our body to calm down our inflammation process in our body. Versus omega-6 is also good, it is exaggerated, so it won't cause any blood vessel heart attack type of situation. It's still good in that way, but omega-6 would trigger the inflammation of our body, which would be a problem. And then there are certain vegetable oils that might have higher amount of omega-6, which is something we need to be careful of. But then olive oil and avocado oil usually has a little bit less amount of omega-6, which is why they are often favored for dietary consideration. And then adequate source of protein. The majority of our body tissue are composed of protein, so apparently you need protein for the healing process to happen. And then red meat definitely very direct source of protein, but then for certain diets, definitely fish, seafood, or vegetarian or vegan, definitely search for plant-based protein. Enough protein source, very important for the healing process, also something to think about. This is like very general, like that's applicable to every single person, like whatever body condition. These principles are applicable to everyone for healthier lifestyle, and it also helps with the healing process of our body, which is also an essential part in managing back pain. Apparently, regular exercise, very important, helps us to have better blood circulation, helps us to have a better mood, not having too much of anxiety, depression, which can also feed into the back pain. Like if we are having had an altered mental level situation, the pain can often be exaggerated. And then consistency is key. It's like maintaining everything we talked about. It's very important. The pain science have finding is that a lot of the time pain is exaggerated by not knowing what's actually going on. So for you guys attending this workshop, you already have a better understanding about a lot of things that can affect your pain. You learn some things you can manage that yourselves. By having this understanding, you are already able to take care of the unknown factor, which is a very, very big accomplishment. But then keep it consistent, maintain that as it's definitely key for you to keep moving on, moving forward to better manage the condition. We already did some demo along the way earlier, so yeah. Any other questions for me? Okay,
Thank you.
no problem. Thank you guys for attending.